kula aua ala au hi'i ea kukulau e alana ia oi moha ia oi lea e mokuhali e ia gai a ula malo ula e hawi mai kei kia nui kai kaika ka no no hawi mai a ui kia holoa o nā lalai o nā ke a mamua maho a manau au o ku ula au e kia e pale olai a mama wano ai Anoa i ke aloha kako e nā hoa velo like au pau, mai kai kina, ko mohana. Welcome everybody to another installation of our celebration for Lā Hoʻihoʻi Ea, Hawaiian celebration of our sovereignty restoration. My name is Hui Kālai Winchester. I'm one of the many organizers that have helped put together the series of events throughout the month. And I'm very happy here to share this space and to share this incredible opportunity with some very incredible carvers that we want to bring to not just Hawaii, but to the world. But first, a little bit of information. Lā Hoʻihoʻi Ea, as we already know, is a great celebration that took place on July 31st, 1843, at the conclusion of a 5-month prolonged occupation. Well, let's say prolonged, I guess, but a short occupation by a British captain by the name of Lord George Paulet. The story goes as Kauikeoli Kamehameha was pressured into forfeiting temporarily the Ea of Hawaii at gunboat diplomacy by Lord George Paulet on behalf of the British Crown. The Hawaiian flags around the kingdom were collected and they were gathered and they were burned. And for 5 months, the Union Jack was raised around the Hawaiian kingdom. Now, this day, July 31st, is incredibly important because a man by the name of Admiral Richard Thomas, the Pacific Command, was sent directly to Hawaii to rectify the situation. And in so doing, he approached Lord Paulet, and after a discussion with him and a report, immediately excused and dismissed Lord Paulet of his responsibilities. He then approached Kauikeoli Kamehameha, and after hearing all of the evidence, had made a formal apology. And in a ceremony that was attended by thousands and thousands of Hawaiians, subjects, as well as foreigners, they gathered on a small rural plot right outside of Honolulu, what is now today called Admiral Richard Thomas Square. And at that ceremony, the Union Jack was lowered, and the High Hawaii, the Hawaiian flag, was raised again. And this time becomes very important because Kauikeoli then thunders from the steps of Kauaihao ua mau ke ea o ka aina I ka pono. The sovereignty of Hawaii is perpetuated in pono. And so tonight, we're very happy to be joined by several individuals from around ko Hawaii Pai'aina from our different moku. And we have some very interesting dialogue that we want to share and we want to offer in this reclamation of consciousness, this reclamation of culture, of practice, of religious understanding, of philosophy, of theories, of frameworks. And so one of the things that we believe is incredibly important aspect of that is the carving of ki'i. Many of us on the Mauna were, or many of us who didn't get a chance to go to the Mauna, were offered a rare opportunity. Ceremonies were streamed live, and it gave our people a much needed jolt of mana, of energy, of aloha. And we hope likewise that some of the discussions that you hear today from the presentations will also inspire you, will raise that sense of independence, will raise that sense of courage, raise that sense of responsibility to reclaim what has always been ours. So on behalf of Lā Hoʻihoʻi Ea, the celebration of Hawaiian Restoration Day, we're very happy to have this presentation entitled O Ki'i Kamua. And tonight we're going to be talking specifically with the group Hui Kālai o Kūpāʻaʻikeʻe, and the Admiral himself, Mr. Andre Perez, who's going to provide a little bit of background. We're going to get a chance to talk story about all the cool things that this group gets to do, Full transparency, I am a lucky member of said group. I just want to say mahalo to Andre and mahalo to all the rest of the brothers for providing this type of space that's incredibly important for us to begin to rise together. So without further ado, we're going to move it over, and we have a short video that was produced by Hawaiian Airlines that we want to offer everybody just to kind of give us a little bit of context. Once the video is done, then we're going to go into our discussion. On the screen, you're going to see a couple of very handsome gentlemen. Andre will talk a little bit about them more, but the two gentlemen I want to outline specifically is Master Carver Sam Kiʻi, who many of us may already know. Sam Kiʻi is a famous Hawaiian wood carver. Andre is going to give us a lot more information on him. And standing next to him in the brown shirt, you see Master Maori carver Lionel Grant. These are two of our masters whom share their information and knowledge in order that can be passed on so that we may rise as a new generation of carvers. Without further ado, we want to present this short video and we can get right into our conversation. Here we go.
Aloha mai kako. Just give me a few seconds as we queue up this this video, and we're gonna start off. Aloha mai. This is Andre Perez. We felt it would be good to start off with a video because it explains our project in a more clear and concise way than me and all of us just kind of winging it off the cuff. So one moment as I set up the video here right now. Share screen. Here we go. Okay. All right, here we go. This is a short video produced by Hawaiian Airlines that gives an overview of our carving project, our Kālai Kiʻi training program, where we're taking 14 haumana through a 5-year training process to revitalize the practice. And we're gonna show this video first. Here we go. Are we showing?
In the screen,
cultural appropriation. Okay. Never work. Let me share screen again. Sorry. Hanaho. Share screen. Yeah. Okay. There we go. Okay. Kalama. Everybody see that? It's gonna maximize the window here. In the cultural appropriation world, they call tikis, you know, this tiki culture, tiki bars. We want to reclaim our knowledge of that carving skill and process and protocol. We started carving with the intention of learning how to carve kiʻi God images. Of course, 1819, the Hawaiian religion is abandoned. In fact, the kauoha, the command was given to no longer carve images for the temple, and some of them were burned. So the high-level knowledge of Hawaiian carving came to kind of an abrupt stop.
Andre, I don't think get sound right now, Andre. Should double check the sound. Yeah, we're not getting any sound, Andre.
Rotorua, which is where he's from. What about now? Which is the
most we're good.
School in New Zealand.
Take that level down a bit lower. Watts. experience I may have had over my career, I want to bring it to bear here.
I'm gonna back it up.
The idea is to give them enough training and methods so that they can solve their problems when they want something to cut. The Prime Minister of the nation of Hawaii is called the Kalaimuku, the shaper of the world. These men are going to shape our tomorrows like our ancestors shaped their temples, their houses, and their great canoes.
And we're very fortunate. Lino, our teacher from Aotearoa, who's very committed to us, he graduated from Te Puia, the New Zealand Maori Arts and Crafts Institute in Rotorua, which is where he's from, which is the most prestigious carving school in New Zealand.
Take that level down a bit lower. What experience I may have had over my career, I want to bring it to bear here, and I want to help my cousins out.
We look to them to help us reconstruct the knowledge of the practice and really put it into practice in a way that benefits and serves the community. And so with Sam and Lino, we launched Hui Kālai Kiʻi or Kūpāʻaʻikeʻe. It's our hope to provide the ki'i for our community hail restorations. Our thought process is we want these ki'i to be utilized in some kind of traditional context for ceremony, for ritual, to revitalize our akua and to strengthen that relationship between kanaka, aina, and akua.
It's a huge, hefty task that we're trying to revive. Look at the pieces of material culture that are left out of Hawaiian carving traditions. Your ancestors definitely had an amazing aesthetic.
With Hawaiian carving, we're dealing with a lot of hardwoods, kauila or hi'a. It's harder to carve. So we kind of didn't develop a lot of surface decoration. Our emphasis became in the overall form, so that projection of power that was put into the overall form with the strength in the legs and the body. The extended facets would shift as it goes around the curvature of the body. So that became the primary Hawaiian aesthetic for finishing. And the only way to achieve that is with the ko'i. We realized that we gotta focus in on the ko'i, the adze. It's the adze that is the creator of the style and the design. Any serious craftsperson, any serious practitioner, whether it be hula, whether it be fishing, whether it be kapa, you make your own tools. You have to understand the process of making the tool to better understand that esoteric knowledge of how to use it. Utilizing steel makes the carving faster and more efficient. So as you innovate and you deviate with something modern, you stay conscious of being grounded and rooted in traditional style and form. Our teacher, Lionel Grant, happens to be friends with this master blacksmith from England.
Straight down the center, pulling that out, and then start working back. Let's swing that hammer. Yeah. What I don't want to see is this kind of business. Right. Let's go. You need to get this stuff really hot. Some people talk about, blacksmiths working the metal at red hot. You don't work at red. It's too cold. It's too hard. Yeah. We like to push the metal up to a bright orange, into a yellow. Often, and we're not working so hard. That's something these guys are working on, judging their heats, getting their hammer technique. Of course, the end goal of this is eventually, if they set themselves up a little portable forge, They can make their own tools. They don't need me. That's the plan.
So we're forging steel, making ko'i, making adzes today, and we're learning how to make the handles and how to do the traditional lashing from Sam Ka'ai.
Aha is the fiber of new coconut. From that, we make aho, two-ply bound cordage. This is what we're binding the handle of the adze to the ko'i or the bite. All of this is just engineering to hold. Some people bolt it on, and when you bolt it on, if you made a mistake, it's fixed. This allows you to unwind, make the fine adjustment.
The mana of using something that you made is one layer, but then someday maybe my son will be a carver, and he'll have the mana of using the ko'i that his dad made and used for 30, 40 years. And then maybe someday his son. So my vision is that at some point there's gonna be a young carver who's gonna have a ko'i that his great-great-grandfather made. And so that genealogical connection, that's what really grounds practitioners in Kuleana. It grounds them in skill and ancestral knowledge and the passing on of that knowledge and the connection of that knowledge to something greater and before your time. Right. Okay. Switching back over. In the cultural appropriation world, they call tikis, you know, in this tiki culture, tiki bars. We want to reclaim our knowledge. Okay, aloha. That carving skill. Can everybody hear me?
Yep. Hikino.
Okay. Just gonna change our share to just a photo as we have our discussion. Actually, I'll just start out. Okay, can everybody see me? Okay, aloha mai kako. This is Andre Perez here with some of our carvers from Hui Kālai Kiʻi or Kūpāʻaʻikeʻe. And we just were asked to share a bit about who we are, what we're doing, what we're trying to achieve with our hui of carvers for Lā Hoʻihoʻi Ea. And I think it was a really good, excellent connection between carving and Ea. But I just want to, so we just saw a little video that shows a bit about our project and what we're doing. Hui Kālai Kiʻi or Kūpāʻaʻikeʻe was established in, 2000 and I believe it was 2015, where we initiated our hui with a 10-day carving intensive on the north shore of Kauai at Waipa, on the grounds of the Waipa Foundation. But the project was really born, I guess, out of what began as my master's thesis topic, my area of research. When I applied for graduate school in Hawaiian Studies at UH Manoa, as part of the application process, there was a question that said, how is your research going to push the Lā Hui forward? Or how is your research going to benefit or empower the Lā Hui? And I really took that, I took that question seriously. I wanted to do something that would make a contribution, a good, strong contribution towards the empowering of our Lā Hui. And so I thought about the different things that I could do my research on. And, you know, there was some, there were certain topics that were within easy reach, kind of like lying at my feet. One of them was the land restoration of our farm project here at Waiava Oahu, Hana Kehau Learning Farm that myself and my partner Camille started. And some people were encouraging me to, oh, do your master's on that. It's easy. You can write about land restoration. But I felt that there were lots of master's theses around land restoration and land-based projects. Another option was I was doing prison work, the incarcerated Hawaiians abroad in places like Mississippi and Arizona and here on Oahu, and how Hawaiians are struggling in prison to find identity and struggling for religious freedom in prison. And I had put, you know, a considerable amount of time into organizing around that. And that would have been an easy MA topic to write about. But I also felt that there were many research, there was a lot of academic research around indigenous incarceration and even Hawaiian incarceration. I just felt that that wasn't gonna really give me an area to expand upon that would be a really strong contribution. And after a careful thought, I decided, because I had a relationship with Sam Ka'ai, I was a woodworker, you know, I was engaging for over 20 years in making implement Hawaiian craft, wood, stone, bone, but the actual three-dimensional carving of ki'i was sort of an untapped area, not only for myself, but even just in my experience in the community, that there wasn't much going on that was accessible towards the actual carving of ki'i. So I decided to make that my topic, Kālai Kiʻi. There was little knowledge. Most of the knowledge information that's been written and condensed in books was mostly from non-Hawaiian anthropologists. There wasn't a whole lot of Hawaiian scholarship or research in this area. And so I started to research, knowing that there would be limitations on what information was available. But, you know, to my surprise, I was able to find a fair amount of, you know, information that was kind of spread out in, you know, in different areas, in Hawaiian language newspapers, in Hawaiian manuscripts, even in, as Kalei Nu'uhiwa says, if there's chants, if there's prayers, there's data. So able to pull together enough info to get a pretty good look at understanding ki'i akua la'au. And that was really the first step, was how did Hawaiians refer to the ki'i? And after some research, I found that the term ki'i akua la'au, or ki'i la'au akua, or akua ki'i la'au, those three kind of phrasings were common in Hawaiian language newspapers, and I was able to find a lot more by learning how they defined, how our ancestors defined ki'i, because that gave me the searchable terms to look for. And so in the beginning, my objective was just to write a thesis and to document whatever I could find about ki'i. How I had three primary questions. How did Kanaka understand ki'i? What was their relationship like with ki'i? Was it always a sacred relationship? Was there a secular component? Or was there a time when the ki'i was sacred and then became secular? You know, of course, we know in our documented history that when foreigners arrived, ki'i were given away. And I thought that was really interesting. Like, why would ki'i be created under ceremony and ritual processes and then later be given away to foreigners? And so there's some complexities around that. I also wanted to learn how ki'i were made. What was the carving process? Where did you start, and how did you proceed through the wood to create a finished piece? And so these were two of the primary questions that I was looking at. And then, you know, what kind of protocols or rituals were used around the creation of ki'i? And so as I started to research, of course, here in Hawaii, very limited on carvers, my methodology relied largely on ethnography, particularly oral interviews and archival research, And so I had an opportunity pop up. One of my professors called me one day and said, hey, the famous master carver Lionel Grant is in Hawaii and he's on his way back to Aotearoa tomorrow. You want me to try and set up a meeting with him? And I was like, of course, I'd love to talk to Lionel Grant. I knew who Lionel Grant was. So she set up a meeting and I was able to meet with him literally for 1 hour before he was flying out. And in that 1 hour talk at a coffee shop, I explained to him some of the ideas that I had, particularly around utilizing Hawaiian cosmogony as part of my theoretical framework or as my research framework, and how Hawaiian cosmogony in terms of the Kumulipo tells us that kanaka came before akua, at least before the identifiable akua, the named akua, the akua with personality and kuleana, the akua with attributes. So that means that we gave them those names and those attributes and those kuleana. So if we look at the Kumulipo, one version says hanau la'i la'i he wahine. Hanau, and then it says o keli'i wahilani kana kane. Yeah, so that chief from the heavens is her partner, her kane. And then the Kumulipo says, Hanau mai kālawa o ki'i kamua. So born to them, to both of them, is ki'i, the firstborn. And so how we interpret that is, I think, flexible and ambiguous. Hanau mai kālawa o ki'i kamua. So born to them is the first, the image. And, you know, is it a name of a person or is it literally an image? What's interesting to me is the next line says, Hanau kane, Hanau o kanaloa o kahe'e hauna vela. So that ki'i is the firstborn to la'i la'i and keli'i wahilani, and then born after ki'i is kane and kanaloa. Yeah. So that's really interesting to me to show that Hawaiian kanaka of remote antiquity, as they say, really created the identifiable gods and gave them names and attributes and kuleana. And so with that understanding, part of my theoretical framework sort of explores and argues that if we agree that Hawaiians created their gods and that we have an understanding of numerous gods, 400,000 gods, coupled with the part of my analysis ties into the remaining physical remnants of the cultural material of ki'i. There's approximately 165 ki'i that are known in collections. But within that which is actually a very small body, a very small body of a particular practice of cultural material. But within that small body, we can see great diversity. Within the 165 ki'i that are in collections, there's a great amount of diversity. So that tells us that the Kahuna Kālai Kiʻi explored, they innovated. Yeah, they weren't stuck into one aesthetic. They weren't monolithic in their carving aesthetic. They were exploring. They were doing all kinds of different forms and shapes and styles. So just looking at that, the fact that there was lots of innovation within a small body of collections, coupled with, we know that Hawaiians created their akua, and we know that we had this concept of numerous akua, then my argument is that what the various akua look like in terms of carving hasn't fully been explored yet. There's room to continue to carve and create new aesthetic and create new images that are based really on our cultural spiritual needs. And in that innovation, in that creation, I think it's important. However, it's important to stay grounded in what Maori scholar Hirini Mokumid calls cultural integrity. So that Hirini Mokumid would encourage, he encouraged innovation, he encouraged exploration, but he also balanced it out with cultural integrity as he defines being grounded in traditional form that informs the innovation, and or the classical form that informs the innovation, and that innovation must come from the indigenous, cultural group of that particular culture. It must be a native person, for lack of a better word, who's doing the innovating, and that it is rooted in community needs and community acceptance, community buy-in. So as I explained these ideas to Lionel Grant in a coffee shop, bring it back full circle, Lionel Grant was enthusiastic about what I was saying and what I was thinking, and he liked the idea. And as we started to talk a little bit about aesthetic, I was asking him, why did Maori carving evolve to a lot of surface decoration, whereas Hawaiian carving moved into more of what in art they call formalism. The overall projection of the carving is where the aesthetic is placed. And Lionel Grant looked at me kind of quizzically, kind of tilted his head, and he said, bro, if you really want to learn about carving, you got to carve. You can't just write about it, which is absolutely true. And then he threw a big curveball at me with the following statement. He said, why don't you get some guys together and let's train them? I'd be happy to give back to Hawaiian people. And for me, that was kind of a whop your jaw moment. I didn't expect that. I always use this little analogy that if you're into martial arts, it's like Bruce Lee offering to be your teacher. So I was excited about that, and I took him up on the offer. But it took time. It took 2 years to secure his time and to raise the funding and to plan it all out. But we stuck. We kept at it. We created a nonprofit. We worked at fundraising to bring Lionel Grant to teach us. There's no way that I was going to let that opportunity go. And so Lionel, we finally secured a summer date in 2016, I believe. Was it 15? 16, summer. And we had the first 10-day intensive, and it was there. Well, let me back up a bit. At the time, I knew that Lionel Grant and one of my close friends and mentors, Sam Ka'ai, who I was in the Halemua, the men's cultural group with, and who I had traveled to Aotearoa with, I knew that Sam and Lionel were friends. I was aware of that, but I was not aware of how long they had been friends and how deep their friendship was. I found out later that Sam and Lionel had been friends from the 1970s when Lionel was a young man, and they had maintained that close friendship since that time. So it was sort of a automatic, natural thing that if Lionel Grant was going to be training us in carving, it was kind of just automatic that Sam Ka'ai was going to be part of it. Because it was really Sam that introduced us to Lionel. So I called Sam and talked to him about what Lionel proposed, what we were planning, and Sam was in. I think Sam had been waiting for this for most of his life. He had been waiting for this type of opportunity to really dig into carving, to teach, to learn, to share, and most importantly, just to be amongst practitioners engaged in the practice. And when we had our first carving intensive at Waipa, it was there that we committed to a 5-year apprenticeship. And that it was there that we formalized into a hui. And I chose the name Hui Kālai Kiʻi or Kūpāʻaʻikeʻe because Kūpāʻaʻikeʻe is a ku form of carving, particularly associated with the swivel adze, also known as the Kūpāʻaʻikeʻe adze, where the blade is able to turn sideways to cut the inside gunnels of a canoe. But it was the versatility, the ability to cut different ways that appealed to me for Kūpāʻaʻikeʻe as the name of our hui. So we formed the hui, and it now becomes my job to fundraise and find ways to nurture the group and to recruit our hui, our carvers. So the first thing I did was kind of create a criteria around how we're going to recruit. And I wanted to pull new brothers in, people who weren't who didn't have access to the circle of Hawaiian artists or craftspeople. I wanted fresh blood. And I know that there was some confusion, from the community on, our focus on kane. And I've always explained that upfront and carefully, that in traditional times, the practice of Kālai Kiʻi was a kane kuleana. And for now, that's what we're focusing on, because we have this huge vacuum in carving in general. So when we're not opposed, to exploring the notion of wahine carving, but right now the focus is on kane, because that was our traditional practice, and that's our focus right now, to empower kane as part of the revitalization effort. Anyways, so we formed this hui, and I start calling up people based on relationships. Jesse Kaho'one, who I went to school with. Ke'a Nui Nui, who I met on the Mauna in 2015. Imai, who I've organized with for many years. Mickey, who came to my farm and left his phone number on a dry erase board that sat there for about 2 years. And started recruiting people who I think were just fresh blood and were committed to the time commitment. And that's really the important part. The time commitment is no joke. We have retreats that are 6 days where we have to commit. Maybe we fly into a remote location on Hawaii Island and we're there for 6 days, or Kauai or Oahu. But every month we have workshops, training workshops, whether it's a 3-day intensive or a 6-day intensive or 2-day presentation and lecture to develop cultural knowledge, to inform the carving, or just your practice time, your commitment every day, every week to put in the hours to carve. But so we move into a formalized hui, and from the beginning, it was always my intention, that was really based on my own life experiences, to make it so that our participants don't have to pay a single penny. There's been many community workshops that I've wanted to go to, whether it be weaving or, different things, but oftentimes they were out of reach, $200, $300, sometimes $400 to attend one of these workshops. Oftentimes it was out of reach for me, and I would imagine it's out of reach for others as well. So for me, it was a principle that I committed to, that as we designed this program and we fundraise, that our participants, their only thing that they had to contribute was their time and commitment. Travel, funding for tools, everything is provided. And that was really based on just understanding the economic situation of our people. Anyways, so that's how our project came to be. Later, we were able to get a big grant, which is sustaining us for now temporarily. And eventually we will, our goal is to move into creating a first generation of teachers. Yeah, so the way I see it was, we want to reestablish the genealogy of carvers that has been broken or fractured maybe, but to reestablish a genealogy of teachers so that we can go back into our community and empower our community. Another principle that we have is all of our ki'i that we carve in the training process, in the learning process, we carve for community needs. I was just on a Zoom call that was talking about traditional practices as art, and I was kind of feeling funny. I'm not comfortable with just art. And Sam Ka'ai really laid that foundation for me. Art is an individual expression. Art is an individual desire to create something for others to look at, for viewing pleasure. Oftentimes, Sam says that a practitioner, whether it's tapa, whether it's lauhala or carving ki'i, you're really engaging in your craft for your community, for the needs, for the ceremonial, cultural, ritual, spiritual needs of your community, practical needs. So as practitioners who are learning this craft of Kālai Kiʻi, it was important to me to create a foundation and a principle that we're really carving in service to the community. So all of our ki'i that we carve through the training process, we gift out to the community, and we survey the community, we engage with our community, we find out what their needs are, we find out if they're capable of caring for a ki'i, and then we carve it for them free of charge, for now at least. But that's kind of who we are, how we came to be, what our objective is, again, to preserve the practice, to revitalize it, preserve it, perpetuate it, and then to proliferate it by teaching. And I think from here, we're gonna move into a little bit more on our kumu, Sam, Lino, and we have another assistant Maori carver who's very accomplished, Rake Kingi. He's assistant to Lino Grant. But maybe at this point, I'd like to hear from some of the carvers, some of our guys, on what their experience has been like in learning from Sam, Lino, and Rake. Anybody want to say a few words? What it's been like? You know what, I'm just gonna call people. Nikki, you wanna jump in and just share just a brief insight into how this experience has been with you for the, you know,
Yeah, sure.
learning everything?
Sure, yeah, I could share a little bit. Yeah, learning under Sam and Lionel has been great. Lionel and Sam like to incorporate a lot of language as far as teaching us, you know, which cuts do what. And that for me really helps me to remember a lot of what I'm doing as I'm going along in my process of carving. Carving ki'i is a little bit different than carving a bowl, little apu. Three-dimensional shapes tend to have a certain pattern. And I think when I think back on the language of what they tell us, it helps me to remember the process, and it kind of helps me to think about what section I'm at. But yeah, everything they teach us has a story. And if you ever have sat with Sam Ka'ai, he's got a lot of them. And I think those stories are something that us as carvers are kind of carrying on too. Yeah, mahalo.
I guess I can talk a story a little bit too. Mahalo for that mix. Yeah, one of the things that I really appreciate being able to work with Sam Ka'ai and Lionel is really that olelo sort of aspect that they bring into it. I know a lot of the cuts and the strokes that we're learning. I know we always are finding these intersections between our olelo and their korero, and trying to see how we can sort of revive some of these old stroke names that I think have been, I don't say lost, but you know, have fallen out of like common day use. And so a lot of the value in Olelo Hawaii, you know, for those of us who study, I mean, if you don't, then you should study. But the Olelo Hawaii aspect of it, I think, brings a very interesting sort of complexity, you know, to the carving process, and sort of even what the mindset, you know, is created when trying to execute certain cuts in certain areas and certain you know, figures that have, or ki'i that have specific usages, you know, like it's kind of a, I know, and I hope Jesse would jump in later on and talk story about that more, because you know, like we kind of always digging through that Olelo Hawaii, breaking it down, breaking the words down, and how they how at least the Maori have these words, and then we make those connections into how we would use it here, and a lot of the similarities I think are kind of profound for us in terms of how, as we learn the aspects of carving. But yeah, you know, like getting to say that you're learning from sort of the best of these generations is very certainly a humbling experience. And I think all of us are pretty good at listening when it's time to listen. and I think that all of us certainly, enjoy that aspect of that kupuna sort of intergenerational passing on of ike, of knowledge. And for some of us who spend time with kupunas, it comes, like fast and furious sometimes. Sometimes it comes fast and furious sometimes, and sometimes it comes fast and furious. I mean, you hear it a lot, is I guess what I'm trying to say. But that to me is like the strokes, that to me is like the carving. That to me is like the tool making its imprint, on you. And so when you talk about Andre, like it's the ko'i that gives the significance, the uniqueness of each, at least the Hawaiian form. Likewise too, it's that alelo, it's that tongue that carves us as individuals as well too. For me, I'm a teacher, so I take a lot of this information back to my classrooms. I'm also a father and a partner and all kinds of stuff for that. So these are things that I try to also use in my day-to-day life, and how I sort of perceive the world, and how it engages my politics, my social relationships, and like to see everybody here. I know like Keanu Inoue, who will share soon, like have their small businesses. Nalu Andrade carves others too. So to see all these guys from different areas with a similar passion and love try to like unfold and unravel and carve out basically, what has always been divine, our own divine power is also coming out in these ki'i. So it's certainly a pleasure to get to work with guys who've been doing it for decades and decades, and also being able to learn with guys who will be doing it for decades and decades. So mahalo.
Anybody else want to jump in? Hanaloa, Jesse, anybody want to jump in and just share a little bit about what the experience has been like learning from Lino and Sam, and just being part of this project?
Yeah, I'll add in a little. So I think, at least for me personally, Nana Ike Kumu never had more of a literal meaning than in this practice. Because I say every time Lionel picks up a ko'i and a chisel, every time Uncle Sam goes to his toolbox, all eyes on them, we're watching them, paying attention, not just to the carving and how they're approaching the wood, but how they care for their tools, and how they malama their space and how they act, all those little mannerisms that kind of help you understand like how they've gotten to where they are with their knowledge, their ike. And I think just spending time with them has instilled a real sense of kuleana for me. Seeing these two masters who spent their entire life and dedicated their entire life to learning this practice, going out there, doing it nonstop, just thinking, dreaming about it all the time. It's a lot of kuleana to bear, and I think we're all trying our best to carry that load a little bit as the time as they unload it onto us. But yeah, it's exciting. Mahalo.
Yeah, I'll jump in and share a little bit too. I think one of the things about being able to work with Uncle Sam and with Lionel is, and with Hui Kālai Kiʻi Kūpāʻaʻikeʻe is, to kind of jump on what the other brothers were saying, it creates this whole web of experience, and this kind of relationship that's built, between, within yourself, with the other carvers, with yourself and like your tools. So the ko'i isn't just a thing that you use, but it kind of becomes an extension of yourself. So being able to work in this kind of group setting with the mentors, right there, they're kind of guiding you. So you really get it really helps to expand your perspective on how you're creating these expressions. So the tool is an extension of yourself, then the ki'i that you create is also an extension, of yourself, because it's your mana'o, it's your perspective, your experience of the world, everything that's informing, that carving, and it's all kind of guided through, through having a teacher, and having a kumu really kind of helps you refine your own skill too, and learn how to identify that relationship. For me, I think on one of the first workshop days, the very first ko'i handle I tried to make, and Uncle Sam picked it up and he broke the thing because he said, "Oh, this is no good. You're gonna have to. Your angle's wrong. The wood is no good. You know, all these things that I wouldn't have never noticed, you know, until it was too late trying to carve with, you know, a tool that wasn't fitted right. And so having Uncle Sam there to, you know, correct your mistakes and just give that guidance has definitely, yeah, and then just kind of shaping that overall understanding of the practice. Anyway, yeah, I think just that those experiences have been really valuable. Anyway, yeah, that's all I'll say for now.
Right on. I think Honolulu, you were gonna chime in, but you were muted. You want to unmute and drop some mana'o for us?
I had operator error, so. Oh, aloha kako, aloha everybody. I'm just so appreciative. I believe I'm the newest member of the group, although one of the oldest, not the oldest, but one of them. And so I really just so appreciative, Andre, just to be a part of this and to be able to learn from people like Lionel, Uncle Sam, Barake, and just everyone in the group. I'm sure you can agree. It's just it's such a kind of a crazy mix of people that it seems perfect, and it's just nutsness, you know, of just, you know, even though we all kanaka, you know, we really have just such a wide diversity of experience and mana'o, but yet, you know, we have these common themes that bring us to these same places of not only in location but in heart and mind. And I think this class is really a metaphor of just, you know, of us following our spirit and being so fortunate to have Andre help to pull this together to create a vehicle for us to have a more formal opportunity to learn from these kupuna that otherwise we wouldn't have. And so I want to say mahalo nui. It's just been very special to spend this time. A lot of what you folks have said already was the same things I was thinking of. Just to listen to the stories from Uncle Sam and Lionel and Rake too. Rake's young, but he's no spring chicken. He's been around, and it was so neat to learn that Rake, you know, is just like such a perfect part of this whole puzzle of our gang. You know, there's been challenges along the way, as there's always going to be, but there's something very special about what we're doing here that goes beyond the craft, I believe, the art even. I think it's, you know, it's even though we're not doing, you know, we're not specifically setting out to do something political, it is political. I mean, you know, what did Hui Kālai used to say? You know, politics starts when a baby cries for milk. So everything's political, really. And I've talked to a lot of kalo farmers feel the same way. Like, you know, you plant that huli, you learn eventually that you are doing something political, whether you mean to or not. And I believe carving is also something like that. I mean, just how it was integrated with the Mauna, the Kukia'i Mauna, was just amazing and magical. Just how that took place. I think that's a great example of just many different forces and people coming together, you know, to help make something happen. And particularly like, you know, us getting direct instruction from Lionel and Rake and Uncle Sam, and then also to have Kaumaka Eva come and spend time with us and to help. What I was so humbled by, not just to tell us do it this way or do it that way, and that's what I notice all of these teachers do. They're trying to bring it out of us, you know. They see I think the biggest challenge is how to unlock the person, the individual, to be able to be a channel that the spirit of our ancestors can flow through. You know, just being alive isn't enough, you know, just surviving. I feel sorry for people who just survive without this kind of purpose, this kind of identity. I feel so fortunate to be a Native person, to have Native blood, and to actually, now that I say that, now I think it's even beyond that, not Native versus non-Native, but just knowing my genealogy, be that my Hawaiian or my German or my Portuguese or whatnot, and I think it's an honor, and it's also kuleana for those of us who do know any of our genealogy, that it's like knowing the stars. It's like knowing your way home. You know where things are, maybe not everything, but you have some orientation. And it seems like everything we do in carving is kind of related to that orientation within this space we find ourselves on, this planet with this atmosphere. And then learning from Kale Nuhiva and Keone Smith and Kalekoa, and oh my goodness, this is like cream of the crop. It's so fortunate, I think, that we can have this direct instruction from this level of people to help us basically bring that thing out of us. There's a thing, I know I didn't make this up, but I can't remember who told me this, but it goes, it's the garden is in you. It's not like you look for a place for make garden. You bring the garden, you are the garden. And I feel like the ki'i is the same thing. We find that God within ourselves. We need to be able to see God before we can make a ki'i. How can we make a ki'i if we can see him? And I think that is such a beautiful thing to learn, along with the art and craft of it too. So yeah, mahalo everybody. It's an honor to be here.
Right on. Mahalo. I'm going to move us along into other topics, and then the rest of our carvers can chime in different areas and offer some mana'o perspective. But a couple of things I wanted to talk about. One was Mickey and Imai brought up language, which is really important. Like, you cannot properly contextualize a Hawaiian practice without Hawaiian language. And so we're working on that as well. It's slow. I did, 5 years of college in Hawaiian language, cumulatively 5 years, and my olelo is still weak, very weak. Some of our guys are stronger, some of our guys are weak, and some of us are in the middle. But our goal is to incorporate Hawaiian language as much as we can. Right now, I'm working with Keone Smith to create olelo worksheets that are command directives for carving. And we've pulled a huge base of terminology relating to carving. I think it's like, almost 40 pages of Hawaiian carving terms that we'll be utilizing within the practice. So I don't want to, I just want to be clear that language is important to us. And moving into the political side, as Hanaloa said, it absolutely, so part of this discussion is connected to Lā Hoʻihoʻi Ea. What is Ea, or what is the connection of carving to Ea? It's interesting, Ea as a word of life, to breathe, to respirate, the spirit, all of that. And of course, sovereignty, really important. I believe that reconnecting to our ancestral akua is really important and critical towards our sovereignty. If we understand that religion is an ideology, and ideologies come with associated hegemony, and hegemony shapes the way we think and the way we behave, then if we really want to decolonize, we should be having conversations around religious and spiritual practices as well. And the political, to me, a political part, really important. Kalekoa taught us this quote from, I think it's a German philosopher, Emil Cioran. He says, a civilization is destroyed when its gods are destroyed. When the colonizer destroys your gods and disconnects you from your ancestral gods, that's when they have assumed power and control. And I think that's really important. And I agree with that. And, as a student, we all of us see lots of research and focus in poli-sci, particularly around decolonial politics, decolonizing, or, you know, decolonial everything. And it's important, and I think it's good, but I don't think we can be talking about decolonizing relationships or that's a good example, decolonizing relationships, if we're not going to talk about decolonizing religion, because Christianity sets a certain parameter on relationships, yeah, you know, which is basically patriarchy, male domination over women, women take men's last name, men assume their wealth, etc. So part of our goal, the underlying part of this project is political, to reestablish our relationships with our akua, and our understandings of them. I wanted to just also lay out just a format real quick on our training program. We have 3 types of workshops. We have 2-day, 3-day, and 6-day workshops. And I had to figure out a way to design it, and that's what I came up with. But our 2-day workshop is what we call cultural foundations. So it's all lecture and presentation. It's understanding anything that's relevant to akua, to carving, learning protocol, prayers, chants, understanding mo'olelo, understanding the attributes of our akua, etc. You cannot be a carver, you cannot be an artist or a carver or a craftsperson that's going to make a physical representation if you don't know your culture, because it's your cultural knowledge that informs that physical, that aesthetic, you know, that physical representation. So we have to be strong in our understandings of mo'olelo, of you know, cultural knowledge. And then we move into 3-day workshops. Our 3-day workshops are designed to be skill building workshops. So that's where carving technique, chisel, control, how to cut, how to sharpen your tools, how to do surface work, how to practice and control the V-gouge, and different things like that. How to understand grain, when you're cutting across the grain, with the grain, horizontal to the, or diagonal to the grain. All of these things are important in our 3-day skill building workshops. And then we have 6-day intensives where we take the 2-day and the 3-day knowledge and we apply it. So the cultural knowledge and the skill building, we apply it to carving a full 3-dimensional kiʻi in that 6-day period. And then we just repeat the cycle, 2-day, 3-day, 6-day, cultural foundation, skill building, and then putting it all together in a kiʻi. So that's how our program is designed. But I want to move us more into a next phase of the ko'i. The ko'i, the ads. You guys can see this a little bit. This was really important. I was really fortunate to start off in exploring my MA research when there was a visiting Maori carver, renowned carver named Rangi Kipa. And Rangi Kipa spent a semester at Hawaiian Studies at Manoa, and he was teaching more rotary tool carving of bone and ivory. And I was not able to take that class, but I was able to spend time with him in between his classes. And he told me, he said, Andre, the ads, you guys should focus on this, because this tool is what sets the aesthetic, what the tool can and cannot do. The parameters of what the tool can or cannot do is what created Hawaiian aesthetic. And he said that many Polynesians have lost our connection to this ads, the ko'i. And he encouraged me to make this a primary part of our approach to carving. And I found out later that even in Aotearoa and in other places, the European chisel, what we know as mallet and chisels, are, European tools have replaced the ko'i because they are efficient and they have different profiles that expand your ability to cut different shapes. But we wanted to go back to the ko'i, and coincidentally, Lionel Grant, our teacher, was already exploring the ko'i. He was revitalizing the ko'i for himself. And Lionel Grant told me that largely in Aotearoa, most carvers do not use any kind of ads for shaping. They do use an ads for flattening wood or prepping wood, but the actual shaping, the design process is mostly with chisels. But Lino had been given a ko'i, a steel-bladed ko'i from a Pacific Northwest carver. And he told me that he threw the ko'i in his toolbox and never used it for a few years. And then one day he picked it up and started to play with it and realized that it was really efficient. And so by the time we met Lino and he started teaching us, he was, a couple of years into making the ko'i as a primary carving tool for himself. And he encouraged us to do the same. So luckily for us, our teacher, or one of our teachers, Lino Grant, has a friend, as you folks may have seen in the video, a British master blacksmith named Henry Pomfret, really nice, gentle man. And he visits Hawaii Island in Kona. He usually visits once a year. So a few years ago, we set up a workshop with him and he taught us how to forge steel to make blades for a contemporary hybrid ko'i. The steel blade is important because it cuts more efficient and faster than a stone ko'i. And there's trade-offs. The stone ko'i has a function of burnishing the wood and finishing it a lot cleaner, but it just doesn't move fast enough for our limitations in this modern kind of 9-to-5 lifestyle that we're all subjected to. So we decided to use steel to kind of bring the best of both worlds, to revitalize the use of the traditional tool, but hybridize with the steel blade for efficiency. And Lino Grant had a lot of input in designing our blades, what our blades look like, the shape. And we were fortunate to have this master blacksmith make us custom blades for all of us to have our ko'i. So we all have finished ko'i, a smaller one like this, and then a bigger one for wasting out large amounts of wood. And Sam Ka'ai, our revered kupuna, I want to talk a bit about him. Sam is the one who set the foundation to me for Hawaiian craft. Sam was making Hawaiian craft with wood, stone, bone, lashing when it wasn't popular to be Hawaiian. And Sam taught us how to lash. He taught us ko'i ergonomics, the angle, how to set the angle, and actually how to use the wood, how to choke up for lighter cuts, and how to slide your hand down for heavier cuts, and really how to finesse this tool into something that gives us a lot of control. So the ko'i is a big part of our approach to learning to carve ki'i. And we're really excited about that because we really don't see a whole lot of shaping and sculpture going on with the ads. And Lino Grant is helping us learn different cutting techniques. And I would say, in closing, I want to say that the ko'i is probably the most important tool in all of Polynesia and all of Oceania, because with no ko'i, there would have been no va'a. And with no va'a, there would have been no migrations, no travel. And ultimately, none of these distinct cultures in Oceania would exist without the ko'i. So we're really excited about that. Moving along, I wanted to have our guys talk a bit about tools. What kind of tools do we use besides the ko'i, guys? With our chisels and how we're applying those towards carving ki'i with the combination of ko'i and chisels. Any thoughts on that? Anybody want to jump in? Kia nui nui? Tools? Anything to share about that?
Sure, I can talk. So as far as our tools go, we're super lucky that in our group, our chisels are funded, and we get to use good metal chisels alongside our adges. Our adze, like Andre said, that's the most important tool for us, is our ko'i. We do a good amount of the work, and a good amount of the shaping is you're only able to do it with the ko'i. And so it makes sense for us to use those traditional tools. Our our mallets, we went out and we got wood and made our own mallets. And even that, like my first mallet is like a big one. Just because I was like, yeah, I'm all stoked. I'm gonna make them big. I'm gonna have the biggest mallet. Bad choice. My second mallet is smaller. It's a lot lighter, and it's just that process of using the tools over and over again and realizing, wow, my arm is sore using the ginormous mallet. Maybe I should make something that fits me a little bit better. So yeah, I mean, it's super cool to be able to work with the tools that we are able to work with. Our handles for our adze, we made our own handles so that they fit how we swing. And some of our handles, like I've made a few handles that just didn't feel right, and so those ones I just don't use as much. But it's that use of them that's super important for us, and that constant use of it, so that you get that muscle memory and you can understand better why, just by cutting like the different lines for the arms and for the head of the kiʻi, it makes it a lot easier to make those curved lines with an adze, and to make even on the big kiʻi, doing the faceted legs and the faceting on top of the entire body. It's a lot easier to do that with a ko'i. And so yeah, I mean, I'm just super stoked that we're bringing this back, and I feel super fortunate to be able to work with all these guys, and yeah, Mahalo.
If Ken, I want to ask Mickey to say a few words, because Mickey was carving before he joined us. He was already carving. He was already experienced and proficient at carving, and then he joined our hui, and it was a little bit different with the ko'i. But Mickey, can you share with us what was it like with incorporating the ko'i, having already had some carving knowledge?
Yeah, sure. So I learned a little bit. I guess I would say I carved a few kiʻi, and when I joined this group, I thought that I'm just gonna come in here and carve a few kiʻi and everything will be great. But after seeing Lionel carve, that guy can carve in so many different directions with one chisel. You know, things that I need 10 chisels for, he'll just use one. Yeah, and I think that's years of practice and years of understanding the grain and understanding the tools. And it really shows how much work that we as Haumana have to, how far we have to go still. But yeah, I think I've learned quite a bit. I think Maori carving is a little bit different than what I'm used to. I sort of partition the wood and kind of plan it out in my head and see it in my head before I carve it. Whereas Lionel, he kind of looks at it and is like, oh, there's a leg. I think it's coming out. And he just kind of goes after it. A lot of times I find that carving under Lionel, I'm a little more hesitant to make certain cuts. But I noticed Lionel's pretty fearless. And he used to always say things like, carvers don't make mistakes, they just make adjustments. So that's really helpful for me in kind of processing where I'm going to make the next cut, what tool I'm going to use. But primarily, like everybody was talking about, using the ko'i has been what our kupuna used, and it's primarily what Lionel uses. But quite a different take on what I already knew and what's being taught in this group, and it's all good, right? It's a little bit of learning from Lionel and Sam, a little bit of learning from each other, learning from some of the adjustments that we're doing, and of course, just continuously carving and getting better. Mahalo.
Right on, mahalo, Miki. I think we kind of want to maybe talk a little bit about ki'i aesthetics. So we have an image up here that's one that I think is very nice. But aesthetic, you know, and that was one of my thesis questions was, what was the primary aesthetic for Hawaiian ki'i, or what was the underpinning of the aesthetic? And so in studying a lot of photos, being able to access Bishop Museum collections and see firsthand ki'i that we normally don't get to see, having Bishop Museum being willing to open up the glass cases so we can take photos. Normally in books, the ki'i is always a frontal shot. You rarely get a side shot profile photo, and you almost never get a photo of the back. So it was many, many hours just studying noses, studying how the mouth or the body, and kind of like what you know, some of the things that I notice just through observation and through carving is that, of course, if I had to say that what is the primary form of Hawaiian aesthetic, for me, it's the aiha'a, that aiha'a, that power, the low squatting stance with the legs bent, knees bent, back straight, hands at the side. I feel that that is the fundamental anchor of the form, and you can play with that. You can make the arms look different. You can make the legs look different. Of course, the face and the headdress can always look different, whether there's a ascending headdress or a descending headdress, or maybe there's no headdress like the one in the photo. But you know, understanding fundamentals of ki'i aesthetic is important. Aiha'a being one of them. Another one is the extended facets that create the finished texture. So one thing I noticed, it's common for some reason, it's common for carvers who are starting out to texture the wood, to use a gouge to create all these little scoop marks. Yep, all these little scoop marks that create texture over the whole body. But looking at what the aesthetic was for our traditional ki'i, it wasn't like that. As you can see, it's fairly smooth, but if you look closely, you can see there's faceting going on. These extended facets, they roll around the curvature of the body. So if you look at the chest, you can get a good photo here. The chest of a ki'i would have facets that are carved down, and as it follows the curvature of the body. And those facets are really made with the ko'i. As the ko'i makes a cut, it follows that cut all the way down, and then it changes angle and follows another cut all the way down, etc. That's how the ko'i contributes to Hawaiian aesthetic. So if you look at this picture, you can see, if you look closely, you can see on the chest, on the legs, the extended facets that make up that aesthetic. And it's often overlooked, almost every time overlooked. And it's really a limitation. You can try and get these extended facets with European chisels, but it's harder. The ko'i gives you much more control. And I wanted to draw in some of our other guys. Keahi, are you there? Keahi, hello. Okay, maybe not. I wanted to hear from Keahi because, Keahi, because Keahi is one of our detailed ko'i nerds. Yeah, Kiahi will just sit there with his little ko'i and just smooth it out like beyond belief. So I wanted to hear from him a little bit. But I don't know, that bugger, stay. Okay, so anybody else want to jump in about actually using the ko'i? Some thoughts? Jesse, Imai?
I'll just share kind of a quick anecdote from our last training over in Kona. I remember it was a few of us, a small handful of us. I think Keanu was in there too. Maybe it was Keahi. It was towards the end of the carving, and we're trying to get to it more like the finer pieces and stuff like that. And I remember just in terms of the ko'i, because a lot of us I think came with that more comfort of working with chisels and gouges and more. Well, I come with more of a like power tool background, so a lot of these hand tools are good for me to use, like learn all the sort of nuances of how to use it. But there was one moment I know that we were working on like finer detail where I guess, Lionel was kind of kicking back and trying to watch us what we would do, to try to address sort of all the same issue. And likewise, I think he was excited when he saw that all three of us reached for the same tool, which was our ko'i, and I think that was sort of like a turning point for him. I remember him sharing that that little message with us that, it's a fundamental importance that, like our technique is developing, and so too is our, our tool of strength, our tool of choice. I think just the expanse of like learning how to use the different tools and when we get to watch Lionel and all of us really and all of us have had our work, our couple of hours, 2-3 hours, 4 hours worth of work get wiped out in a few aggressive swings by the master, and so too does our our pride. But it's just an interesting thing to witness somebody, well, at least at Lionel's level, to be able to take such aggressive hits and strokes and really see, the angle and let his blade, an extension of him, really like bring that out. And so I know it's always a challenge for us to kind of eat, swallow our pride a little bit, because we're all, I think we wouldn't be here unless we took pride in the things that we did. And I think in terms of, how we're using more of that ko'i style to really articulate a lot of the form. I recall that last time we were all together over in Kona, he was really, I think, excited by the prospect that we were starting to make that turn as a hui, like that we're not gonna take like the easy flat gouge or whatever and try to knock it out, which you could have, but instead we turned to kind of just sticking with that ko'i, which I think for the three of us when we were there was kind of definitely affirmation. It's nice to be told that you did something right every once in a while. But I'm sure next time we'll see us, he'll blast our work away later. But it's a good practice of humility, to be able to work with guys who are just decades ahead of you. But just like our olelo, we make that sort of comparison. But just like the Maori cousins have made, they're about 20, maybe 30 years ahead of us in terms of their language reclamation. Likewise, like when you're saying when it's our kids' turns and we're kind of old and bleary-eyed guys, we'll also have a couple of decades under our belt too, and that'll be sort of the mo'okuauhau that we all get to kind of share. I know you've used this metaphor before, but he's kind of like this opportunity to sort of represents like the the reclamation of va'a society and wayfinding. Like Papa Mao is important to making that peva, and repairing something that was important for us. And when colonization and imperialism sort of swept a lot of those practices to the wayside, I think the art of decolonization, includes sort of the restitution of some of these practices by our cousins, because we need to understand that we're bigger than just Hawaii, we're the Moana Nui. And a lot of our tools and technologies and our languages and our foods and all of the things that we do and we share, we are a ocean people, and so Kanaloa I think, I heard Billy Kinney say, Kanaloa is like that infinite space, yeah. And so likewise, so too is our knowledge base as well too. It's infinite. And we're only starting to just swim at the surface right now. But as we get deeper and deeper and we dive lower and lower, we're able to hold our breath. We're able to take, stronger pushes towards the bottom. I think we're going to be able, as a people, as Kanaka Maoli here, to find, that ea, that life that kind of brings us to who we are again, and that reclamation, like we're seeing made popular by the worldwide voyage. I think this is another opportunity for us as Kanaka people, as Kanaka Maoli, to really reposition ourselves, to reorient ourselves, like Honolulu is saying, to traditions that really informed, not just our social, our social dynamic, but also our politics, also our agriculture, also, the things that we do, the things that we don't do. So there's so much things that are really tied into to the practice. I have a lot of like discussions about, fatherhood with a lot of these guys here. And to me, it's more than just learning how to carve, it's learning how to be carved, by the collective experiences of everyone, and everybody. That's what I really enjoys. Everybody brings their personal strengths, their experiences, even our, our vulnerabilities and our weaknesses, and it's an important space to also reclaim, that type of camaraderie, that sort of brotherhood, like to see that we're not just a single piece of wood, but we're actually part of a greater forest. I think is an important type of medicine, a type of la'au lapa'au, that I personally am able to appreciate and take away, is just the value and the power of being like on the same plane, with like-minded people who have the same interests, the same commitments, who raise their families and who are having these important discussions. So just in terms of, planing, that Ko'i, I think has really done a lot to like knock out some of the bumps and lumps and really sort of shape who we are, as a people as well too. But I likewise, like Honolulu was saying, I have a lot of appreciation for you, Andre, for giving us this opportunity. Certainly for hooking us up with tools, because just that alone would have been a huge barrier for us teachers, and us. It's a lot of money and it costs a lot. So we have lots of gratitude, every single one of us, I know, for the opportunity that we have to spend together, and the potential that we have, to carry this on into a new generation, into a new owl of consciousness. So just mahalo to you and mahalo to all the guys for being a solid group. And I like that because like the Kanaka material is hardwood, and I've never worked with so much hardwood, never worked with llama before. Like I worked with that llama before I went up to Mauna Kea, like those moments, carving, while our people, are on the, Pu'uhuluhulu, our people are on Kupuna Road, we can hear the chants, we can hear that, we can hear JC Momoa across the street, whatever, is happening, like, and this is the tapping, the tapping of, that I think is also imbued, into the piece itself. And like, I really enjoyed what Kaumaka Eva had said when she sat down with us when we were at Pu'uhuluhulu, carving those 4 images, was that, the piece, the wood is already divine, we don't make gods of these woods. They're already, we're born with their divinity, and likewise we have that divinity, we have that sacredness. And so that moment on the mountain really helped to awaken my idea of like our own sacredness. And I recall the ceremony where we presented them, I know there are 2 ceremonies, but when I was able to participate and when guys are doing hula and the ki'is are moving together, and I've seen people come up and just give mahalo, give their ho'okupu, their makana, and just to see that type of plane of existence, of appreciation, of respect, I think was really powerful. I think for me to witness in terms of being a Kālai Kiʻi. So again, just mahalo everybody. Those are moments that I'm never gonna forget. So I appreciate it. Thank you.
Mahalo, Imai. And I just want to say that for me, organizing this hui of carvers is just really a natural extension of what I already do anyways. You know, as an activist, I live a life of service, really, and we all do. And important too, relationships. Like me and Imai go way back to, you know, Kaho'olawe when we were younger, back when my hair wasn't gray, and me and Hanaloa go back in activism. You know, a lot of our relationships, I've done, even with Jesse when we were classmates at UH Manoa, like, you know, we're outside Kauai Ha'o Church protesting the desecration of Iwi. So I want to just acknowledge that, you know, the creation of this Hui was really grounded and rooted in community service and organizing as a principle. And I was fortunate to learn organizing through social justice and sovereignty and self-determination first. You know, organizing around Hawaiian sovereignty, organizing around things that we have to ku'e, to protect. And so that really gave me the foundation and skills to, you know, be more efficient at bringing this group together and finding the resources for us to be empowered and to learn and to grow. And then with the intention that we're in turn, we're going to service our community and we're going to teach. But of course, I want to tie in, Imai brought up the carving of ki'i on the mauna, probably Mauna Kea and the pu'uhuluhulu occupation, the creation of the pu'uhonua being one of the most significant times of our generation, creating that critical mass, all of our people coming together. And we were faced with a problem because we were on the Mauna. We were afraid of imminent police threat to come and try and clear the kupuna off the road. And so I had to make a decision because we had carving workshops scheduled for October, and I didn't want to leave the Mauna. And half of our guys were already there on the Mauna anyways. So I talked to a few of our carvers and I was like, why don't we just have a workshop right here on the Mauna? We're already here and we got lots of space. And so the decision was made. We didn't want to leave the Mauna because of the fear of police threat, police operations coming to clear us off the road. So we flew in our Maori teachers, Lino and Rake from Aotearoa, and we were fortunate to bring in our kupuna, our guiding light, Sam Ka'ai, to the Mauna. And the majority of our carvers came, and I put the word out looking for wood for la'au. And Uncle Earl De Leon, bless him, he made a connection. He said, I have a friend who has some aina, and there's some trees that they're willing to share with you for the Mauna. So we were like, great. Initially, we didn't realize that it was lama, which is, you know, very sacred wood. Lama's not that rare in terms of its abundance, but it's rare that people would cut down lama. It's rare that we would get that size. But we were fortunate that we had a couple of families from Miloli'i who were willing to donate lama that was on their property, that needed to be removed or was in the way or was in the process of dying. And we got lama logs donated, the biggest, tallest, longest lama logs I had ever seen. And so this carving workshop on the Mauna became really significant just because of the woods that we were working with, in addition to being in the physical location of on the Mauna and in that time of Kukia'i Mauna, that time of critical mass to protect the Mauna. So all of the pieces came together, and man, we spent 3 days and nights carving. We basically had a 6-day workshop in 3 days. But what was interesting for me was we're in the process also of developing a curriculum for our carving hui. And I feel that, you know, a lot of what we learned on the Mauna is going to be part of our curriculum. The first thing that we needed to know was what was appropriate for that place, for Pu'uhuluhulu, for that location, for Mauna Kea. And it was through discussion with practitioners, with Kaumaka'iwa, with Kekuhi Kanahele, Sam Ka'ai, Lanakila, and all of us, that we decided, one, ku kia'i mauna, we needed to carve a ku form. What ku form? And it was in discussion with other kama'aina and practitioners, particularly Kekuhi, who told us that ku moku hali'i, which is also a god of carving, is also a presence on the mauna. Ku moku hali'i is also the god of the fresh lava flow, where the mulch and the very beginnings of organic material began to take form on the fresh lava. So the little pockets of soil, dust, of organic debris, as they build up, new life sprouts up, new forms of plant life. So ku moku hali'i was one of the forms that we decided to give life to out of this, the wood that we have. Another one was, of course, the summit of the mauna, many mo'olelo about the female deities. There are so many female deities that we decided to carve one kind of female ki'i that would sort of capture the essence of that female energy through the various akua present. And we called that one Wahine Noho Mauna or Wahine Noho Kapu. And that female image was carved out of solid lama. And then we carved Kane for the water, the hidden waters. Yeah. And it was interesting for us, and I'll probably let the guys who carved them explain it, but there's very limited knowledge on physical images of Kane. Yeah? Kane is often represented through the pohaku o Kane, upright stones, very limited knowledge on carved images of Kane. So we had to incorporate, we had to innovate and still remain grounded in cultural integrity by incorporating cultural knowledge and symbolism into this. And who's here that worked on the Kane image? Hanaloa, were you on that one? Want to share with us, Hanaloa, about the Kane aesthetic, what you folks came up with, and the symbolism, etc.? You're muted. You got to unmute.
Okay.
Unmute.
There you go. Can you hear me now?
We can hear you now.
Can you hear me now?
Yep.
All right. So, yeah, Tyson had the main kuleana of the head. So him and mainly Lionel did the head. And it was, yeah, we really had to innovate, you know, from top to bottom, from the top of his head down to the bottom of the pole. And it was really neat. This is where, you know, it was just critical that time we had with Kaumaka'iwa, because I know me personally, you know, especially being a beginner, I just, you know, I wanted her to just kind of tell me, well, this is a symbol of Kane, and this is a symbol of Kane, and she wasn't having it, you know. She wanted to give us more of the context and the bigger picture, and then kind of help us, you know, to bring it out of us. She wanted to know what we felt, you know, how we saw different symbolisms. I said, well, how do you do a rainbow? You know, we don't want to just make a rainbow. And so she's like, no, she was more like trying to prompt our own thinking, our own feeling on it. And I really appreciated that. So, you know, with the poll, it was Tommy and Kea Nui Nui and myself did the poll, and we had a lot of guidance. Tommy and me were very appreciative of Kea Nui Nui, and because we were both like, oh my God, what do we do from here? And I think I really liked what we came up with, and I, you know, it was pretty organic, and you know, you had a part in it. You know, you were keeping us grounded too. Yeah, Andre, you didn't want us doing any what you call unicorns and butterflies on there, but but I think it worked out. You know, even thinking about how to show the sun, you know, different aspects of Kane. And we didn't want to do something so on the nose as, you know, it could have been solid with just sphere and rays coming out. But I think we came up with something even more subtle, you know, and that had a theme throughout the whole poll, you know, of having the high down. And then we broke it into 5 different sections, 5 being, you know, significant to Kane, 5. So the lima and the man. And then in the head, there was a lot of innovation in the head. From the top, we had lightning bolts or kanehikili on the head. And then, you know, there was many other aspects. I want to leave some for Kenoenui too, but even using the fire, which is something that Kamaka'iwa was talking about. How since we used for the head, we used koa, and then lama was our pole, you know. And so Kamaka'iwa was sharing with us how the koa seed, you know, can last 100 years, you know, and that thing won't sprout until there's fire. And so we introduced fire into it. We burned some at the bottom of the pole and then also up towards the top and then in the head. And I think, and it also to help show the lightning, the kanehikili. So we had just a lot of kauna going on. We used in the eye of Kane, we used lama. And I think that idea, I forget exactly who came up with it, but it was pretty organic too. And I think it came from a chip. That was a llama chip that was on the ground, or somebody caught. Was that you, Kenoenui? Caught the llama, and it was neat because I think a couple people, it just kind of came together. So we ended up using an inlay of llama in the eye, which is kind of a yin yang kind of thing too. Having the pole being llama, and then the head being koa, but with the eye of llama, and I kind of like the kauna of that, you know. So it was really neat that we were able to kind of take our modern sensibilities and translate them, interpret what we felt was the traditional aspects of culture, of carving, and to integrate our modern understandings of that. And I really like that. So mahalo.
I think if I remember correctly, the idea was that the Kane image would be the tallest one up on the pole because of that relationship to the sun. But the pole, was where the pole touched the ground, the base of it, we burnt it to symbolize that kanehikili, the lightning. And when a lightning strikes a tree, how it kind of hits the ground and burns, charges the base. All of that was really innovation that what came about through a lot of discussion, right?
Yeah, that was awesome. That's what was neat about it is Kamaka'iwa wasn't just going to give us a list and say, okay, you can do the triangles for this and the little waves for that. And she wanted to bring it out of us, and I like that.
And I think that's important because I think there's like common agreement that in Hawaiian ki'i aesthetic, nobody really knows, nobody can really tell you what the symbolism, I mean, there might be some surface knowledge, but only the carver can tell you why he put that cut, why that symbol is in there, why that aesthetic, why are the eyes round instead of narrow, why is the mouth open instead of closed, or why is there a headdress instead of no headdress. The symbolism part is the hard part where only the carver can tell you what his inspiration and motivation was through that symbolism. And so this kind of guided us a lot on this Kane image. It played out exactly like that. And I think what was also important was understanding place, which was really powerful. So understanding the mo'olelo of Kamiki in relationship to Pu'uhulu, to Pu'uva'ava'a, to Pu'uiki, to Pu'uanahulu. And we, I didn't know that mo'olelo was tied to that place. And so in understanding that better, we realized that Pu'uhuluhulu is named after Huluhulu, a kahuna. It's not the hill with hair as the Paniolo had, logically interpreted Pu'uhuluhulu, but it was really to commemorate the memory of Huluhulu in a kahuna. So that became for us another ki'i that we were going to carve to commemorate, to remember, to anchor that moment in time when we were at Huluhulu. We were there at the Huluhulu, the base of the pu'u, occupying that aina to protect the mauna. So that image was born out of knowledge of place, of mo'olelo. But I want to see is Kiahi. I wanted to pull Kiahi in a little bit because Kiahi is a part of our team. He's really from nearby that area. He was there, and Kiahi really puts a lot of time into honing his ko'i skills. But Kiahi, you want to share with us a little bit about your experience working with the ki'i on the mauna when we carve those images?
Oh, aloha mai. You guys can hear me now?
Yeah, we can hear you now, brother.
So I don't know, technical difficulties with the phone earlier. Yeah, no, it was, I don't know how to say it. I mean, it was pretty amazing in the middle of all that chaos to try and get into that zone for inspiration and having Lionel and Rocket come up. And I mean, it was pretty amazing, like the way that Uncle Sam ties stories together, and then, you know, having our own stories being created as we're going through this process. It's, I don't know, I think that part of it is pretty amazing to have, you know, the Mauna Kea movement kind of sparked this global uprise almost of indigenous people's taking back their aina and iho matao and everything that was going on in Aotearoa, and then to have them come up and make that connection where we're tying together gods that haven't really been recognized for the past 200 years. So that's pretty mean. Yeah, I didn't know all that story with all the llama and how we actually got hooked up with that connection, but hearing those stories, adding another layer of depth to that mana'o and all those ho'ailona that really kind of pulled together that whole amazing happening. Yeah, and like what Honolulu was saying with the inspiration from Kamakaiwa, I think the Kanaka Oles being there was super pertinent, and having their inspiration, their guidance, you know, and having that like Kanaka Ole kind of vibe for just like, yeah, whatever, make a map, just hammer, just, you know, like what you feeling, don't worry about what I feeling, what you feeling. Like just that familiarity for me, because growing up with them in Hilo, that's kind of, I'm just kind of used to that vibe, you know. So yeah, that I would love to take more of that llama and bite into it with the ko'i somewhere. But yeah, mahalo Andre, mahalo everybody.
Right on. I want to move us along into talking a little bit about protocols. So really interesting in my research around carving. There's two, I mean, you know, we could say, I think most people would agree, there's two like primary carving tracks in traditional Hawaiian society. One would be the carving of va'a, and one would be the carving of ki'i, where you had this sort of high level kahuna knowledge. Probably because of the arrival of Christianity in 1820 and the embracing of it, the knowledge, the ritual knowledge of carving of Kālai Kiʻi has not been documented very well. Or if there's something out there, I haven't found it. So very little knowledge around protocol, prayers, chants, rituals for carving ki'i. But there's actually lots of information around va'a. I mean, it kind of makes sense, right? Because va'a was not so much a religious, didn't have so much a religious function as ki'i did. Va'a was, basically a practical tool for travel, for fishing, for transportation. And sort of the traditional approach to carving va'a, I think, persisted well into the 20th century. Sam Ka'ai, grew up in Kaupo, Maui, in the 1930s and 40s, carving va'a with his kupuna. and we can in what's documented in manuscripts in Hawaiian language newspaper, you know, in primary sources, there's a fair amount of knowledge around the sort of the ritual nuances and mannerisms of carving va'a. So we don't have a choice. We have to kind of take information that's relevant and pull it over and apply it to where we need it to be. So we look at the va'a rituals, you know, to help inform us as we sort of reconstruct Kiʻi, Kālai Kiʻi rituals. So we're working with different people to help us with Kale Nu'uhiwa, Keauni Smith, Kalekoa Ka'eo, and others to help us sort of develop carving protocols in terms of opening prayers, closing prayers, chants, rituals, etc. It's an important part of the process. We acknowledge that, we embrace that, and we're in the process of redeveloping carving protocols for our hui as well. Any thoughts on that, folks, about the learning of pule and oli? For me, it was real powerful when we were on the mauna. We were coming down with the ki'i on our shoulders, these big, heavy logs, and we're able to engage in our one of our pule together. To me, that is a critical part of the carving process, is your behavior, your mannerisms. I'll talk a little bit about that before we dive in, but like how we cordon off the area. You know, we know that it's documented in Fornanders how the, from Hawaiian informants, how the kahuna kalai va'a would close off the area with kaula, so not to be disturbed, to create that space, and to focus on the task at hand. We treat our ko'i and our mallets as personal, very personal tools that, you know, we respect. None of our carvers, we don't just grab each other's ko'i without asking, or our mallets, you know. Sorry, that was kind of funny. But you know, the ko'i is a very personal tool, and the idea that this ko'i will probably outlast me, and someday end up with one of my sons, and someday end up with one of my grandsons. And that's mana right there, yeah? That's that genealogical connection. So how our mannerisms, our behavior is shaped through the carving process. So as Sam Ka'ai would say, the Kalai Aina, the shaper of the world, the Kālai Kiʻi, the Kahuna Kālai Kiʻi was a shaper of, a contributor to the shaping of Hawaiian society. And in turn, through the process of using hand tools, of dealing with the challenges of grain, wood grain, of curly grain versus straight grain, of segmented grain, etc. In that process of using hand tools, I feel that we're being shaped. In that process of our conduct and our behavior of conducting a sacred practice in a sacred place, like pu'uhuluhulu, in turn, we're being shaped. Yeah, we're shaping wood, but through the process, as kanaka, we're being shaped. And so I think that's important. One thing I want to kind of talk too about is the genealogy that was mentioned. Within traditional practices, whether it's hula or other practices, genealogy figures into that too, important, right? Who's your kumu is the question, yeah? Who taught you? And understanding that your behavior and conduct is a reflection of your kumu. So when we started this project, I just want to add this part because it's important. You know, many years I would see people utilize Sam Ka'ai's name as their kumu. And then I would ask Sam, hey, you know, who is this guy? They're doing a workshop and they made a flyer or whatever, and they're claiming that you're their kumu. And Sam would be like, I don't know who that is, or I don't remember that name. So it's really easy to claim a kumu, you know, and of course, there's a tendency to do that when we're trying to, like, you know, promote ourselves. But I wanted to be really principled about that and grounded in the truth and integrity of it. So Lionel and Sam are our primary kumu, and that, you know, the outcome of this project is that all of us will be able to say without a doubt, right, with integrity, that Sam Ka'ai was our kumu, that Lionel Grant was our kumu. And so the goal, I hope, is that 100 years from now, somebody will be able to trace this genealogy of Hawaiian carving, of Kālai Kiʻi, back to the new starting point. Yeah, the genealogy was broken, and therefore we had no choice. We had to recreate and retrain and reestablish, just like Hokulea had Nainoa to help organize and bring people together, Herb Pane bringing people together to create the space. We have Lino and Sam as our kumu as we attempt to revitalize and perpetuate this practice that we care about and that's important to our community. But we're getting low on time, guys. Any final thoughts? We also want to make time for Q&A. Imai, you want to take control here? Do we want final thoughts from our guys, or we have any questions from our viewers?
Mahalo, Andre. I'm looking at the Q&A. Nothing came in yet. Maybe if some guys wanna, maybe we can just close out final thoughts. We're kind of right around that 8 o'clock hour. I'll try to look through the Facebook comments, see if there's any questions that we can put off. But maybe. Why
don't we do this? We one of our things was what does the future hold for us? Maybe we can talk about that. Like what's on the horizon while Imai sees if viewers have questions. Well, I'll start. I want to pass it off to someone, but for us, for our hui, you know, I know that there's lots of people interested, and lots of people have inquired how to get involved. When we created this program, it was, you know, I quickly recognized that carving, in particular, it cannot be a one-off workshop or even a 2 or 3 off workshop. You're not going to learn to be a proficient carver in a 2-day workshop or a weekend workshop. It's years of commitment and training. It's at least 5 to 7 years of commitment. So that forced us to keep a very narrow scope. We weren't able to open it up to the broad-based community as much as we wanted to. We had to focus on our 14 first-generation haumana to train them. And because of that, the nature of the work is a lot of practice, a lot of time commitment. But our big picture goal is that all of us, at the end of our training, you know, and we're from different communities on Kauai, on Oahu, on Hawaii Island, and Maui, that our goal is that we'll be able to go back to our communities and share this knowledge, and the curriculum that we develop, our haumana will be able to utilize that curriculum to share and teach at some point in time. So I think that, you know, as a message to the La Hui, be patient with us. We're trying to develop the core, and then we'll be able to go out and proliferate carving in service to our communities. But guys, any other thoughts on the future, the horizon, like some of the ambitions that we have around heiau restoration, kahakaʻio, honaunau, Jesse, we get what's the other heiau, ahuena, that needs at some point may need restoration work. What's your guys' thoughts on that?
Hey, so I'll jump in. Yeah, so looking to the future, I think our group is really setting us up to contribute to some big opportunities on the Kona side of Hawaii Island. You know, and it puts us in some interesting places too. So I work down at Pu'uhonua Honaunau, which is a national park, federal park. So there's all kinds of interesting things to navigate, you know, on that side. But anyway, part of what the park preserves is the Haleokeawe heiau site, which was one of the islands, or one of Hawaii's few mausoleums, halepoki, that housed bones. So just being able to, and when that site was restored, now you go to the park, you can see the ki'is. And so that site was restored back in the 1960s. And actually one of the carvers that worked on that project was Uncle Sam Ka'ai, back when he was like our age. And so kind of being able to continue that mo'okuauhau is a pretty cool part of it. And also to be able to see that the restoration of these places is continued by, you know, kanaka maoli, and that the national park's not bringing in, you know, wood carvers from Oregon or Connecticut or other places to do this type of work. So yeah, getting into just revitalizing that practice of O'omana and making it relevant to our lives today and the places that we, you know, that we work at, that we live at, and the communities that we're all associated to. Because again, all of us carvers are from all over the Pai'aina, and we all have vahipana that, you know, are in need of attention. On Hawaii Island, Kona, we have, Honanao, we get Heao in Kealakekua, Napopo, Hikiao. Get places in Keoho and Kahalu'u, down there, Ke'iku and Hapaiali'i, which are partially restored already. And then, we have Ahuena Heao, which has ki'i that were carved by Mauna Roy back in like the 70s or 60s even. So yeah, a lot of opportunities to continue this practice, to make it relevant, and to start reclaiming our places with our mana'o and our aesthetic, and yeah, just kind of continuing that genealogy that, you know, has already been created, and now we get to be the next branch in that. So yeah, that's definitely something looking at here for the future, at least for the community where I live, and also putting the ko'i in the hands of, you know, the next generation. And I think that was one of the big, I know for me, when I joined this group, that was one of the commitments I made to my ohana, was that I'd be able to use this experience to help educate our next generation, and to see kids coming up with, you know, the ko'i in their hand and doing that kind of work. Anyway, yeah, mahalo.
Ima, are you there?
Yeah, I'm here.
Yeah.
Sorry, is it tag? Is it my turn?
Do we have any questions?
Yeah, we do have a couple of questions. I know, Mickey, for those of you guys who are watching, there's a Q&A that came in just about tools. One question was about the difference between metal and stone tools. I mean, I guess maybe in terms of our experience, if there's something you can share. You guys can also type it in on that Q&A down at the bottom. And another specific tool, specific question that I guess we can answer kind of easily just based on our experiences. What is the best wood material for ko'i? Anybody want to take that?
What was the question?
Keanu Inoue. So the question is, what is the best material for ko'i? Best wood to make ko'i? And I guess maybe if you have a like preference on fibers and stuff like that for lashing. And I guess another sort of follow-up question is like experience between metal and stone tools.
Okay. For wood, as far as the handles.
Yep.
Okay. I mean, traditionally, it depends on if you're gonna use a metal or a stone. Stone at its head. If the head is gonna be stone, the wood is gonna be different than if it's gonna be metal. If you're gonna use a metal blade, then you want a wood that's hard enough to be able to handle the back of that metal blade constantly as you carve, being hit against the back of that. And you also want something with a little bit of weight on it, because the metal is so thin, and with the rock is big and heavy, so you can get a lot of downward force with that stone. for me, I mean, for me personally, I like my Vai-V handle. I like the Vai-V because the Vai-V and the guava, if anybody in Hawaii can get Vai-V and guava, if that's what you're looking, if you're looking for something that you can get. Vai-V and guava is amazing. That's what basically all of us get. I do have a handle that's alahe'e. I do have a handle that is koai'a. Traditionally, you'd probably see hau, some other type of light hibiscus or something like that. Something lighter, because the rock, sometimes those rocks, those things is big and heavy, so you don't need as much. You don't need the weight of the wood. You don't need the hardness of the wood. You just need it to be able to hold that heavy rock on there. Yeah. As far as lashing is concerned, if you're going traditional, coconut, nah, I'd prefer those over hau.
What do you use today?
It's the stuff that Andre get. It's this line that they use on top of boats.
Yeah.
It's just boating. It's cherry. It's the one that Andre showed us. It's cherry. But yeah, the one for lashing the edges it's like a boating one. It's wax and I think it's nylon. It's good.
There it is.
Yep.
See,
again,
that's the lashing is we use a seine fishing nylon cord, like a rope that's like covered with like a waxy tar-like substance, so it locks in when you tie knots. But in traditional times for lashing, one thing that's important is aha over aho. Aho is round cordage. Aha is the braided flat, and it would be aha that was used for lashing a ko'i.
There is maybe I know Kiahi, I've been seeing that you've been doing a lot of stone work as well too. So maybe you want to share a little bit of mana'o too. In terms of your experience dealing with stone maybe versus metal. This seems to be one of the last questions.
Yeah, mahalo. Just listening to the conversation that's happening, actually, I like take one metal blade and weld them onto a metal handle now and see how that works out. But I don't know. I actually haven't had the honor of playing with too many stone ko'is. Although the ones we have seen, I imagine work like Ken Nui was explaining earlier, how because of the weight, it just moves more wood per stroke. And then just trying to figure out how they made such fine work with big stone tools like that is kind of the mind-blowing part to me. Is, like what Andre was saying earlier, how the stone tools will burnish as you swing per hit. That adds another layer of depth of thinking about what the finished product looked like at the end and how you would get that kind of result, and how you got to think about your cuts going through it with a stone tool versus, the fine metal tools we have. It's much easier to get into some of these smaller crevices that I'm trying to figure out how they would have done that with some of these stone adzes, which is kind of the trick and challenge of, and I'm sure some of the reasons why we're going back to using the Neolithic methods of producing these crafts and these images. That's kind of the key to the aesthetic. But yeah, I mean, if anybody out there gets stone tools that they would like us to try out, so we can, better understand how that works, we're open to them.
I can add a few things on the use of stone ko'i as well. So be able to, of course, Sam Ka'ai has all these things. Yeah? Sam Ka'ai has made all these things over the past 60 years. But and there's some documentation that talks about a carver. I think it was a canoe maker in the 1860s, maybe, where he would use, of course, you know, steel is prevalent. So this Hawaiian carver in the 1860s, I believe, would use the ko'i with a steel blade to do a lot of the rough work. The steel blade will cut a little faster, more efficient. The stone ko'i cuts a lighter cut, more of a shaving. So it's a slower process. But the stone ko'i will give you a cleaner finish because of the grain of the stone. As it's cutting, it's followed by, the stone ko'i is curved. So the cutting edge will cut, and then the curved lip of the stone will follow the cut and burnish the wood. So it's almost like running a, 600 grit sandpaper right behind your cut in one stroke, and it would kind of seal off the wood. And so then in this article I read about this carver in the 1860s, they say he would use the steel for roughing out, but whenever he would finish, it was always finished with the stone ko'i for the sealing, for the burnishing of the wood, and it's just a slower process that's a lot more safe because you're removing less wood per cut. This is a wrap here. We're a little bit over time, folks. Imai?
Yeah, mahalo once again, everybody, for tuning in wherever you guys are in the world. I want to mahalo Andre Perez and Hui Kālai Kiʻi o Kūpāʻaʻikeʻe for the time tonight, sharing about some of the exciting work going on in our Lā Hui, for our Lā Hui, by our Lā Hui. And this is a very exciting time to be kanaka. And we're always looking, and I think this is the thing that I appreciate from all of these guys. Like, I knew I was in the right group when the first day I showed up to Mauna Kea for the defense. I saw every single one of their faces without even having to the kind, so I already knew that it was some sort of serendipity that brought us all together. So I mahalo for those moments, to all of these kanaka here, to the moments that we have still yet to lay out, for all the divinity in the forest that await, our touch, our stories, our laughter, our jokes are the kind, I want to say mahalo to some of our sponsors, Hawaii People's Fund. I want to say mahalo to Ahakane. And again, on behalf of Lā Hoʻihoʻi Ea Honolulu, and the celebration of Lā Hoʻihoʻi Ea Hawaiian Sovereignty Restoration Day. It is a celebration that's taking place not around just Oahu, also ko Hawaii Paʻaina and all around the world. So as we take to the virtual waves, we celebrate our Ea. We celebrate the success, the return, the repatriation of our customs, our traditions, and our ideologies. So on behalf of Lā Hoʻihoʻi Ea, e mau ke eo ka ina kapono, thank you for joining us tonight. Mahalo, everybody. Good night.